It is so good to have your company on another Towards Understanding podcast, and get set for a great larrikin. Whether you love soccer or not, John Boyers, the Manchester United Football Club chaplain, has got a great story to tell. Before we get stuck into this, if you love the podcast, would you link, rate, review, share it with friends, whatever you need to do, get the word out there that bit more. It helps us just get up in the algorithms and more people to hear these stories. Let's get stuck into the conversation with John right now. How are you, John?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for having me on program.
Well, it's wonderful to have a chat to you, and arguably the most famous of any sports team in the entire world is Man U. Do you sort of sense that as you get to be a part of what is happening, or is it just sort of, well, it's a football club and it's just part of the role that you're playing?
It is part of the role that I'm playing, but it's interesting because the club has grown since I've been there. I was asked to go there in 1992, and they had about 220 employees, and now we've got over 600 employees, and it's vast, and its world reach is huge, and it's just a remarkable example of a commercial organisation. Yeah. As well as a football club.
Yeah, and those two do really mix interestingly, don't they? We understand that as sports gets more professional, the club sort of concept mixing with the business always has a little bit of a tension going with it. Take us through, and we want to sort of dive into a bit of your story. We're going to do that in just a moment. But first, what do you consider your role as a chaplain is? And I suppose thinking around someone who might never really thought much about chaplaincy in sports clubs, what does it mean for you to be the chaplain there?
I'm there as a sort of pastoral and spiritual safety net to people. I want to be a friend of the club. I try and build relationship with all employees. I don't just focus on the playing side. So I divide my 3 days a week between those who work at the training ground, who are coaching, management, playing staff, and those who work at Old Trafford, who work in the offices and departments. And in each location, I try and spend one lunchtime working the tables and chatting with people at lunch, because that's a good time to go in. So I'm there for all of the people. And I find that part of that is just building friendship and relationship and getting to know people. Because I think if people don't know you and if people don't trust you, if there is a crisis, a problem, a difficulty that they want to talk about, they're not actually going to talk to you.
Yeah.
But if they know you and trust you, that they're more likely to open up, and you can be of some sort of support and help to them.
Yeah, I'm guessing that takes a fair bit of time, though.
And that takes time.
Up. Yeah. We are going to get to the decision to actually say, hey, I got asked to come and do this. I want to get to how did that actually come about. Yeah. But let's go back a bit further. Was sports something that you were always interested in? Was working in churches and those sorts of things always something a bit more of the passion? Tell us a bit of your journey.
As a kid, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach geography in secondary school. So that was my hope, and that's where I first started working. I went to Nottingham as a student, and although I'd been brought up to go to church and Sunday school, Mum and Dad were very keen Methodists, and I had a vague sense of God. But it was while a student in Nottingham that all those things really began to fit together and came alive, and I realised there was a lot more to Christian faith than just going to church on a Sunday. But I came away from Nottingham and planned to go into teaching and did that. Met my wife in Nottingham, so we've been married since 1972. And Anne also is a teacher. She taught primary school, I taught secondary school. But I had said to her that maybe God had said something about being involved in ministry, and Anne said, well, look, if that develops, that's fine, I'll support you in it, and if it doesn't, don't worry about it. But after 3 or 4 years, it did develop, and we felt a call for me to go train for ministry. So we left teaching, we left where we were living, we went down to northwest London. Anne got a teaching job in Watford, and I went to a theological college in a place called Northwood in northwest London, and I did my theological training there. So that was the transition from being a teacher to training for Christian ministry.
Yeah. And did you end up working in churches, or was it, you found yourself into the parachurch sort of?
Well, I ended up working in churches. I always thought church would be the final destination of that. I linked up with a local Baptist church. So that was my student placement. So I linked with them for 2 years. And at the end of my course, they said, would you come and stay with us and be our sort of assistant minister? So we felt that was right. So we stayed with them. And then when the senior minister moved on some 4 years later, they said, look, we would like you to be senior minister of the church. And we prayed about that. But in all of that process, God really opened a possibility of chaplaincy at Watford Football Club. The church was in Watford, and for various reasons that are too detailed and complex to go in, we felt very much that a door was opening to talk to Watford Football Club about the possibility of chaplaincy. So that was way back in 1977. And I knew nothing of football club chaplaincy, save what a guy who'd visited the church had mentioned to me. He'd been chaplain at another club. But I learned it was a very steep learning curve. And I got involved in Watford Football Club and began to learn the culture of football and began to learn what it was to be a minister working not in your church, but working in another environment. I'm there as a guest. They've invited me in. They've asked me what I might contribute to the club. I've told them, and then I've got to deliver that. Yeah. And I describe that as sort of almost pastoring a secular congregation. Yeah. You know, you're there to help, you're there to support, you're there to encourage. So when the guy gets injured, when a new guy comes in, when an established guy is let go, when someone has a bereavement in the family, when there's a new baby, you try to be involved. When they move house, when they've done something significant in their career, you know, you can send a note. When something really disastrous has happened, you can get alongside them. So it was caring for people, and not just the players, but right through the club. Yeah. And the manager then said, look, this has gone well. He gave me a first experimental year and said, we'll see how it works. And he said, look, this has gone well. Can you do it for a second year? And this all happened while I was still a student at theological college. And then he said, look, we're really pleased with this. Will you continue the work? So when the church said, will you stay? I said, look, I've been asked to continue this at the football club. And they said, we'll give you a day and a half, a week of your time. So they were paying 25% of my time to work outside the church, which was great. Yeah. And really that experience at Watford was the foundation for all that has happened subsequently.
Yeah. I think you said 92, 91, 92 that you felt like Manchester United was saying, look, how about you join with us and get involved? How did that come about?
I was contacted by Manchester United in 87. Watford were a small club, but through a very good manager called Graham Taylor and through a very high-profile chairman called Elton John, there was a little bit of notoriety. Yeah. And they progressed right up the leagues. And people were looking at Watford to try and work out what they were doing and why was it special. And we had a very good attitude to community. We did a lot of good community contact. We had good family enclosures. We provided a creche so families could come and people could look after babies and young children. We did a lot of work with young kids in the community, coaching young kids. We also had a chaplain. Yeah. And people would write in and say, can you tell us about what your chaplain does? Yes. And I went to half a dozen, 10 clubs to try and explain what the chaplain was all about and how it worked. And in 87, I got a phone call from a man I didn't know who, it transpired, was the secretary at Manchester United. And he said, look, we understand you're chaplain at Watford. We are thinking about chaplaincy here at Manchester United. Would you come up and talk to us? And I'd done that with a number of clubs. And I said, yeah, sure, we'll fix a time. And I did. I went up and they took me to lunch in the grill room. And in the middle of a conversation about what do you do and how does it work, the club secretary said, if we offered you X thousand pounds a year, would you come up and do for us full time what you do for Watford as a volunteer? And it was a better deal than you got as a Baptist pastor, I tell you. But I said, I'm not sure. And he said, why are you not sure? I said, well, I'm a Christian minister. And I said, it's not just the money that attracts me. I said, I need to talk to God about it. I said, I need to talk to my wife about it as well, and maybe not in that order. But that was just a joke, by the way. But don't tell my wife. But in the end, I said, what you're offering me doesn't particularly attract me for two reasons. I said, I'm now senior minister at the church. I've got an assistant who is leaving in 6 weeks' time to take over another church. And if I left as well, at a time when the church is growing and developing and we're seeing a lot of people come to faith, the two key leaders would be gone. And I said, that doesn't seem strategic. But secondly, there are few other clubs that would be interested in funding a full-time chaplain. And I said, Manchester United, because they're significant, we need to have a model here that can be applied to other clubs, other lesser clubs, other smaller clubs, other less wealthy clubs. And I said, the Watford model, where someone gives their time voluntarily for a day, day and a half a week, that would work at every club. And I said, I think that's the model I'd like to see at Manchester United. And they said, well, will you think about it and come back to us in 2 or 3 weeks? And I felt sure that we should not take the job. And I said, look, I can find you someone who will do that job, because the guy I was at theological college with is now in one of the Manchester suburban churches. He's represented England at athletics and he understands the sports world. And I arranged for this guy to get involved. So that was 87. In 92, that same guy moved to a church in Canada. And the club contacted me again and said, we're about to lose our chaplain. Will you come up and talk to us? Mm-hmm. Now, can I put a little bit in brackets here? Yeah. In 1990, the denominational leaders of the Baptist Union of Great Britain, we all need to bow at this point, had contacted me and said, would you consider leaving normal church work to develop chaplaincy in sport? And we'd prayed about that, and we said yes. And they wanted that done interdenominationally. They weren't doing it for Baptists. Yep. They wanted to do it nationally, and they put a little bit of startup funding into that, and a little bit of ongoing funding from their home mission support fund. So in 1990-91, we set up a registered charity that would manage and oversee me trying to develop this. And I didn't know where it was going, but we felt God was in that. So when Manchester United called again 5 years later, because we're now back out of the bracket, because their chaplain was going to Canada, they said, look, we've done our research on you, and we know you're no longer employed by a church. You're working for a charity that's developing sports chaplaincy, so you don't have any issues about where you could be based. And we remember what you said last time. You said that you thought working for a small period of time was a good model, working as a volunteer was a good model. So can you please come? We want you. Can you please come to us, but on the basis that you're working in Watford? You move to Manchester, we'll have you for a day and a half, and we'll not pay you anything. And again, I said, look, we need to think and pray about this. But we felt, and particularly my wife, who's not sporty at all, but she really felt that this was of God. And I took counsel from a number of various people, because it was a challenge to us. We'd had 2 young kids. They were in Watford. It meant moving schools. My wife, a year earlier, had gone back to a teaching job. She'd got a full-time permanent contract. We thought that was part of God's provision for us, working in the charitable sector, which is not easily financed. And I said to the charity, look, don't worry about funding me. If the money's not there any month, at least Anne's got a job, we can cope. but we knew moving to Manchester cut off the financial safety net. So it was a big step of faith from many points of view, but we felt right about it, and various other people said, no, this is of God, go do it. So we moved to Manchester in 92, and I started again, having done 15 years at Watford, where you had got to know everybody and got very involved, embedded into the culture of the club. Now you're starting at a huge club and you're on the periphery and you know very few people. And those you do know were very famous, and you think, how on earth is a chaplain going to impact any of these? So that was a big step and the start of another big learning curve, really.
Yeah. We're going to be back with the Manchester United Football Club chaplain, John Boyers, hearing more of his story next.
Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielen. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
John, we heard a bit of your journey into Manchester United. If someone's just joined us, it took you spent 15 years with Watford and then was asked to come along over to Manchester United and had said to them, look, I don't want you to pay me. And so they said, sure, we're okay with that. Come on in as a volunteer, which is what's happened. You're now working 3 days a week, still in that volunteer capacity, is that correct?
No, because there was a time when, because I was working for the charity that we'd set up to develop sports chaplaincy, and that charity was financially constrained, shall we say. And Manchester United had become the richest club in the world. The club secretary, who turned out to be a Christian man, although I didn't know it when I first joined them, the then club secretary turned out to be a Christian man. He said to me, I do have a moral issue with the fact that we are now the richest club in the world. You work for a registered charity who pay for your 2 days with Manchester United, and we don't give anything in lieu of your time. So there was an agreement then that they should pay 2 days out of 6, so that my time, in a sense, was paid for. They made a donation to the charity,
which is wonderful,
which is good.
Yeah, fantastic,
and shows there is a moral conscience.
Yeah, exactly right,
which is good.
So from 92 through till now, you've been the chaplain of this, the biggest club in the world in any sports, not just in soccer, football, but in any sport. You've seen the highs, the lows, the championships. You've been there during the David Beckham, era of all attention around the world seeming to be on him. Take us through what the hardest thing is. And just again, a caveat that everyone understands, we're not asking for specific names at all. There's a lot of famous people been through, there's a lot of others, but we're not asking for names. But what's the hardest thing about being a chaplain in the biggest club? And then what's the greatest joy for you as well?
Some of the hardest things are realizing that the media profile of people should not affect my commitment to them. So I don't give more time, more attention, more care to players than I do to non-players, or to top players rather than junior players. I try and treat everybody the same, whether they're an international superstar or whether they're a part-time cleaner who comes into the training ground early on in the morning to get it ready.
Is that hard to do? And I ask that in the sense that there's a part of me almost says, well, but there's more opportunity to actually influence. They might need more help if there's all this pressure around them and that sort of thing. Is that actually something hard mentally to make sure that you broke through on to actually do? Or is that something that's easy for you?
Not really. Because in a sense, I did find it very hard to think, what have I got to offer the superstars?
Sure.
Would they be interested in me as a chaplain? Because I think the top superstars get chased by fans all of the time. And what I've learned in football is the chaplain mustn't do what the fans do.
Yeah.
Because you're not a fan. you're there with a totally different role. So as a general rule, when I used to train chaplains, I used to say, don't ask for autographs, don't ask for photographs, don't ask them for do this, do that, don't ask them for tickets, don't ask them. You're there to give, you're there to serve, you're there to help. You're not there to ask of them, to let your link with them benefit you, you know?
Yep.
And I just try and treat everyone the same, really.
Yes.
And that is part of your ongoing work.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've forgotten the question.
The second one was about the greatest joy. What's the greatest joy that's come from that time in there? It's a bit unfair, 24, 25 years just to ask for one, or maybe there's a couple of the greatest joy of actually having that role that you've had.
I think that the most significant thing I did was when we remembered the 1958 Munich air crash 50 years later in 2008. And the club asked me some 9 months before the anniversary date, can you begin to think about how we could do this and what we should do? And we worked for a good 8 or 9 months, increasingly tweaking and detailing what we would do. And I ended up leading the remembrance service part of that day's remembrance activities. And then one of our local, Northern Ireland TV guys, who's known as a big Man U fan, Eamon Holmes, came over and he did an hour's celebration of the Manchester United youth ethic, picking up the idea of the Busby Babes, Matt Busby's young side that died in the crash, and how youth and attacking attractive football has been part of Man United's heritage. And at the end of all that, the club were very happy at the advice I'd given, and they gave me something to remember my contributions by. And I felt very touched that the club had involved me in that, and on a really big occasion, both in this room with 1,200 people in Manchester United's ground, and a big gathering of fans outside the ground, and then 2 other events, one at the location of the old Munich airport where the crash happened, and then one at the current Munich airport. All this was coordinated, and it worked very well, and I was very thankful for the way it worked, and particularly thankful for the way the club acknowledged that your expertise, if you like, as a minister, had been used. So that was a thrill. There are lots of other things I could, particularly where similarly people value what you have done and what you have contributed.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And then, I'm guessing there's the whole lot of personal conversations which we're not going to go into, which you have sort of constantly as you go through. One question I want to ask, especially about from someone who's been a chaplain for a very, very long time in one club, is that obviously you get more used to the place, you understand how it works a bit more, but there's constantly players and managers and staff that are changing, and perhaps might go back to that same sort of understanding of being a bit wary of a chaplain. So in a sense, you almost don't ever get to put the runs on the board for everybody, because there's this sort of constant wariness. Is that something that is happening? Is that something that you learn how to best work around that? How does it work for you?
It is always a tension, because I think change is always a challenge to chaplaincy, because you feel that you've got established in a pattern of working and people have got confidence in you, and then suddenly something changes. New players come in, new managers come in, and that is always a challenge. But as a chaplain, I've always tried to work as the management, as the club want you to work. I think having been there now for nearly 24 years, there is a lot of support for what I do within the club. But let me give you a couple of examples. In the days of Gary Neville, David Beckham, Paul Scholes, Nicky Butt, and others, that group that graduated in 1992, I knew them as very young players before they got into the first team. And that was very helpful. And that process has continued, because I've I've given time to the young players. I've watched their under-16s, under-18s games on Saturday mornings. I've done life skills work in their classroom time. So they know me, and they feel that Rev John's okay, you know?
Yeah.
And therefore, when they broke into the first team changing room, they were developing the ethos that, the Rev's all right, he's okay. And that was really helpful. So when we signed new people from outside, Gary Neville, who's a bit of a trade unionist, Gary's always quite vocal, great captain. Terrific guy. Would tell people, look, Rev John's okay. Don't worry about him. He's here to help us. And that was all very helpful. So to have a group coming through the club who knew you when they were nobodies and felt you were helpful to them when they became significant, all that was terribly helpful. And the fact that at a different level, the manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, he was there when I joined in 92, and he stayed till 2-3 years ago, and he was always very supportive of chaplaincy, and that was good to know. The challenge has come as management has changed. When David Moyes came in, he knew of me. They had a chaplain at Everton, and Henry had always done a good job there. So David said, look, I know you, John, I know what you do. Just carry on and do what you've always done. That's great. When David left and Louis van Gaal came in, I realised that Louis had not had any experience of chaplaincy at all. And eventually Ryan introduced me to him, and we had a conversation. And Louis seemed a little surprised that I was a priest and I worked at the club. But he said, I will ask about you and what you do. And about a month later, he said, everybody likes you. They think it is a good thing to have you around. And at times you are very important to different people. So please continue what you are doing. And we've got on very well. In fact, I sent Louis a text saying all the best for the Aston Villa game, and he sent me a text back saying all the best for the trip in Australia.
So, wonderful.
I think we've got a good relationship now. But it's strange if people don't understand what chaplaincy is all about. They can be very suspicious of it. You're getting some sort of spiritual input in, a minister,
You're praying for a win? Is that what you're doing? Is that
absolutely. I said to someone in the staff canteen, because they said, if you're going away, you better pray for the team, Rev John. I said, I never pray for results. And they turned around to me and said, you're the problem.
At least they've identified where it is. That's the go. There's got to be some funny stories that go on behind the scenes of Man U, which I'm sure you are allowed to tell. There's probably a few you're not allowed to tell, but some that you are. Is there one of those ones that you go, I always just share this story. It's just fantastic.
Well, I'll give you a couple of stories. One from my previous time at Watford. I used to go up occasionally and support the first team as they played away, and I think we were at Blackburn. And I got to Blackburn, which is a long way from Watford, which was northwest London. Blackburn is up in the northwest of England. But the club had said, go to the commissionaire and we'll have a ticket waiting for you if you're travelling all that way to be with us. So I went to the guy on the door and said, Reverend John Boyers from Watford, I've come for a ticket. And a really old man. I wondered if it was a stuffed model or a commissionaire, but it turned out to be a commissionaire. And he said, who? So I said, Reverend John Boyers from Watford. And he said, John? So I said, yeah, John. So he pointed to his guy further down and he said, there's Elton John from Watford here. Can you lead him through? So I went in to collect my ticket, being introduced as Elton John from Watford, which was, Yeah. They obviously hadn't seen my piano, heard my piano play.
That's right. Well, when he's the chairman of the club, you may as well just play with it. I love that.
And then another funny story from my earliest days at Man United. I'd only been there maybe 6 or 8 weeks, and I understood where the under-18s and under-16s played on a Saturday morning, and I was determined to go down and watch that group of players. And so we went down to a place called The Cliff, which was the old training ground. And I watched this game, and we were playing a fairly lower club from Lancashire. I forget who it was, but it might have been Bury, let us say. Yeah. And we didn't play terribly well. We were 1-0 down at half-time. And it was not a good performance. And then the second half proceeded, and we conceded yet another goal. And the team were a bit fed up and aggravated, and started to put in a few hefty tackles. And one of the Manchester United players was sent off. There's about 20 minutes to go. We're down to 10 men, and we're losing 2-0 to Bury. And but something sparked the team, and we grabbed a goal with 15 minutes to go, and Bury started to get very nervous, and Manchester United, 10 men of them, played with a lot of verve and passion and skill, and with about 85 minutes on the clock, they equalised. It was 2-2, and this inspired them to even greater efforts, and they pounded the Bury goal, and Bury, it was like the Alamo all over again, you know. But in about the 89th minute, they scored a third goal and a winning goal. And the referee blew the whistle, and the game ended. And Manchester United, with 10 men, had come back from 2-0 down to win 3-2. And I thought that was remarkable. It showed great character, great endurance, and great determination. And after waiting a suitable time, I thought, well, it might be appropriate for me to go to the under-18 changing room and just knock on the door and say, well done, lads, that was a stunning end to the game. And I thought, I think that would be okay, because the coaches know me as Chaplain. And so I made my way into the building and found the under-18 changing room. The door was locked. No, not locked, it was closed. But I knocked on it, and someone said, come in. So I went in and said, sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to say that was an absolutely stunning last 20 minutes. You've done brilliantly. And as I looked around, I realised there was nobody in that room that I recognised. In fact, I saw shirts of the Bury team draped over various benches. And I said, oops, sorry, I think I've got the wrong changing room. And I came out and I checked the door, and it said under 18, and I found someone. I said, where's our team? And they said, oh, for actual games they vacate the under 18 changing room for the visitors, and they use the reserve changing room, you see.
Oh boy.
And it's one of those occasions where you wish a hole would appear and you could dive in it. And I look back on that, and I learned so much from that, because really, I think as a chaplain, you try and understand the detail and the culture of the area you're working in. You keep your mouth shut, you keep your ears open. That's right. And you be very careful not to say the right thing, but in the wrong place.
That's right. The Bury plays the gee whiz, that Chaplain really rubbing it in, eh? That's not good at all. John, thanks so much for your time. We've so appreciated it.
That's great. Thanks for having me.